I just was horrified that mankind would stoop so low, be so lost, that they would do such a thing. And for the most incredible conspiracy theory to be true, I think this is the fear of the government of it coming out. Even though faking the moon landing killed more people than 9/11 and even the Kennedy assassination witness list, it's the one that would probably bring about the most change in the government because it would outrage the public.
Welcome to After Hours with Dr. Sigeloff, where he can share ideas and thoughts with you. He gets to the heart of the issue so that you can find the truth. The views and opinions expressed are his and do not represent the U.S. Army, DoD, nor the U.S. government. Dr. Sigeloff was either off duty or on approved leave, and Dr. Sigeloff was not in uniform at the time of recording. Now, to Dr. Sigeloff.
All right, I first want to start thanking all of my Patreon supporters. Shell Pace at $50 a month. Anonymous Family Donor at $20.20 a month. We've got the Plandemic Reprimando at $17.76. And there we have Ty, Charles, Tinfoil, Stanley, Dr. Anna, Frank, Brian. We have a self-made level at $10 with Kevin. We have the Refined Not Burned $5 level with Linda, Emmy, Joe, Pat and Bev, PJ, Rebecca, Marcus, Elizabeth, Dawn, Jennifer, Ken. Frank has made his own level at $1.50 a month, and then the Courage is Contagious at $1 a month. Amanda, Jay, Spess Nasty, Darrell, Susan, BB King, and Rick. Thank you so much for all the support that you've given me. It's truly been very helpful in knowing that this is needed content and helping me fight this fight. If you are unable to become a Patreon supporter, please consider prayers and giving at Give Send Go that my wife has set up. The guest that I have today is amazing. His name is Bart Sibrel, and he directed a movie called A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. He also did a movie called Astronauts Gone Wild, which is not like some of those other Gone Wild movies out there, but there is someone that gets punched in the face, and maybe we can get him to talk about that a little bit. And then a book that I just recently finished called Moon Man. Now, sir, what is your premise in these books, and what's kind of the direction you're going? Because it's a novel topic that many people haven't heard of.
Well, I think people have heard of it, but they just haven't pondered it seriously. The term conspiracy theory, I guess, was created by the CIA in the 60s to kind of make people who think that Oswald did not kill Kennedy talk about them in a derogatory way. The fact is, half of all crimes or more are conspiracies. Half are done in the heat and the passion of the moment, and the other half are plotted out in advance. If you really think about it, probably more crimes are plotted out in advance than are passion crimes. So conspiracy is a federal term. It's a federal indictment, often used against gangsters. And when our federal government has become gangsters, which is basically murderers and embezzlers, which they are, then they conspire to pull off their crimes. And so the term conspiracy theory came about, and you could say chemtrails could be in that, or weather modification could be that, although both of those things are factual. You could say quintessential conspiracy theory is the one that the moon landings were filmed on Earth in a TV studio. And as someone who grew up believing in the moon landing wholeheartedly to the point of having a shrine of them in my home wherever I went, a dedicated area of Apollo 11 pictures, I assumed they were real. And then when I found out that they were not, what's really shocking, Sam, is this most preposterous thing that the government is so arrogant to fake the moon landing is actually true. And I know you talk of things from a biblical nature. And when I was first asked to produce this movie, I, as a 14-year-old, up until, from age 4 to 14, was when I was 4, when they allegedly walked on the moon, and got a picture of my father, from my father, who was in the Air Force, this packet of 9 by 12 color prints. And I cherished them and built a shrine. Every bedroom I moved to, which in the military is every couple of years, had that shrine to Apollo 11. So when I'm 14, I see a former contractor for Rocketdyne who worked on the Apollo program for 6 years with very high security clearance say they couldn't do it, so they bluffed like in poker. Well, I'm an open-minded 14-year-old, so I go back to my bedroom shrine, look at these pictures with a little bit more critically than I had before, and sure enough, you could see where the real soil ended and the fake backdrop began quite easily in the older pictures because they have since color corrected them. The original ones had the moon soil caramel brown, which it actually is, and the backdrop kind of grayish blue. They now make the soil grayish blue in all the moon pictures, but in the original ones, if you can find them, it's very caramel brown, so it makes it pretty easy to discern where the real Earth is and the fake backdrop begins. And so that kind of planted a seed in my mind. And if you fast forward 10 years into the story, at 24, I'd become a filmmaker who's making fake pictures look real is the whole point of the job, right? I mean, that's what
Yeah.
filmmakers do. They make fake scenes look real. And so I was producing or editing a program for the guy who had produced the show I saw 10 years earlier as a 14-year-old and was like, who was that guy on your show who said we didn't go to the moon? And he put me in touch with them, and he suggested as a filmmaker, I produce a film about it. And after investigating it first for about 6 months and finding incredible inconsistencies in the picture, really you can prove the moon landings are fake with one picture. I mean, I could share the screen or you could add it in later, but it's a picture where they claim is on the moon, where the shadow of the astronauts going in the 12 o'clock direction and a shadow of a rock about 5 feet away is going at 9 o'clock. A 90-degree difference in shadows from objects 5 feet apart, where if you go out in your front yard and two friends stand beside one another on a cloudless day, you'll see your shadows of your body always run parallel, and it's impossible for them to intersect because the sun is 93 million miles away. So to claim that this picture was taken in sunlight is completely false. So really, you can prove it legally, technically, and scientifically that the moon missions are fake when you have shadows intersecting at 90 degrees from objects 5 feet apart. So if you add to that the fact that the Soviets launched everything first animal, first satellite, first man, first woman, first spacewalk, and they had 500% more man hours in space than we did, and we suddenly went from being in space for 15 minutes to walking on the moon in 8.5 years, it seems a little bit odd when it can't be repeated 50 years later. And then the behavior of the astronauts is really bizarre. And then there's so many, things that stand out that when I first realized it could very well be true that they faked it, I turned it down for fear of my life. And because I thought, if the CIA or whoever did fake it and I start overturning these rocks, could be hazardous to my health. So I originally turned down the project. And then a few years later, a client challenged me to read the Bible, which I did. I got a 1-year Bible and read the Bible 5 times from cover to cover over the next 5 years. And I came to the conviction that, first of all, there is right or wrong. It makes sense there's a judgment for what we do in this world. And I realized if they did fake the moon landing, that's actually more profound historically than if they'd actually gone. Do you see that? Either they planted a flag on a rock, came back, or they deceived the whole world. It's mankind's greatest accomplishment by allegedly the shining light country on the earth, and it's all a forgery, embezzlement, murder to cover it up, lying to history, lying to their citizens. If that's true, that's actually much more profound historically than if they'd actually gone. And when you realize, as I gradually did, that they really did fake it, it just blows your mind. So when I changed my mind, I said, I'm going to die anyway. And you might as well go out in a blaze of glory for a just cause. And so I changed my mind, and as serendipity would have it, a few days later, I met a millionaire who builds rockets for NASA who knows the moon missions are fake. He gave me $1 million to produce these films, and I still said they probably went, but you never know. And then 3.5 years into the 7-year project, I pop in a tape. It says, "Don't show to the public." It's behind the scenes, unedited footage, dated 2 days into the flight, of them faking being halfway to the moon with a 1-foot model, and the CIA on a third track of audio telling them how to fake a 4-second radio delay. And when I saw that, Sam, I'm like, oh my gosh, they really did fake the moon landing. And I just was horrified that mankind would stoop so low, be so lost, that they would do such a thing. And for the most incredible conspiracy theory to be true, I think this is the fear of the government of it coming out. Even though faking the moon landing killed more people than 9/11 and even the Kennedy assassination witness list, it's the one that would probably bring about the most change in the government because it would outrage the public. Because whoever did 9/11, all those people are dead. Whoever killed Kennedy, he's still dead. But this is a positive lie. Taking that away, taking that candy away, taking Santa Claus for adults away, and telling them it's all a lie, giving them a turd in place of their candy, I think they would be outraged. In fact, a news director at NBC saw the footage I uncovered, agreed 100%, it conclusively proved that they did not go to the moon, refused to broadcast it for fear it would cause a civil war. He says, "I'm not going to go down in history as the man who caused the Second American Civil War," because he figured the American public would be so outraged. And that's why, to this day, you type in moon landing fraud on Google, you don't get anything about the fraud. You get 1,000 links about how, no, we really went. I mean, come on. If I went around saying that Mickey Mouse was the first president instead of George Washington, do you really think there'd be 1,000 videos to refute me? I mean, come on. And so something made out of straw has to be constantly supported, and that's what they're doing. And thanks for letting me ramble on. Sam, I'll let you ask your next question.
No, this is great, and I just want to kind of put this in context because it was a funny encounter I had with another guest who said something because I like looking at things that other people feel uncomfortable looking at. Ever since I've had, I kind of gave you a background of my story, but ever since I've had the mask taken off of me and I've been able to see the truth with diet, we didn't talk about that, but many of my listeners, viewers know that I have a very different opinion on diet, and I learned nothing in med school. And then with the whole COVID vaccine issue, my opinion on vaccines has significantly changed. And then I start looking into different subjects. And I've actually had one guest say to me, in reference to another guest I've had on, say, "What's his address? I need to send that guy a tinfoil hat." I'm not saying that about you. It's the thing that he was talking about. People might say that he needs a tinfoil hat. But what we need to do is not come to the table with our conclusions that, oh, this is crazy because I saw it, I knew it, this is what I was taught. Maybe there's more to it, especially when you show things that to me would be proof. Every one of the things that you've mentioned seems like it would be proof that you could use in a court, unless you can defy physics in certain places like those pictures where the light intersects.
A lot of these films, my book that you mentioned is interactive. There's 16 video clips. I kind of write a chapter and I say, now go to Sibrel.com and watch clip number 1, clip number 2. All these clips are available for free, to watch at Sibrel.com. If you want to buy the book, it's on audio, which I read, Kindle or print. And so, we actually have 4 times the proof that would prove it in a court of law. All we have to do is get a jury and say, let's go outside and see if we can get somebody standing and put a rock 5 feet away and see if we can get these shadows to intersect at 90 degrees, and you can't. And then you go into the courtroom, turn off all the lights, bring in a studio light, have a person stand in the 12 o'clock position to the light, put a rock over in the 9 o'clock, and you'll see, oh, okay, now we see that it can only be duplicated with an electrical light, which means they're on Earth. So that proves it. Secondly, NASA today, we're talking about with 5 decades better rockets and computers. The farthest they can send a human being into outer space is 250 miles. The moon is 1,000 times farther away. That's why there's mannequins orbiting the moon now. You see, So what they're really claiming is, in 1969, when all of NASA's computer power combined had 1/millionth the processing power of a cell phone, they sent astronauts on the first attempt ahead of schedule 1,000 times farther than NASA can send astronauts today with 50 years better rockets and computers. So they're saying that they had 1,000 times greater technology in the past than in the future, but you can't have greater technology in the past according to historical precedent and science, which means the claim is a forgery. That's what it means. And then the third proof is this classified footage that I uncovered. You can see it for free at Sibrel.com. They claim this is the Earth floating in space. The lights come up, and it's a 1-foot model. And there are the astronauts, and it's dated 2 days after they left. And you hear a third track of audio of the CIA telling them to fake a 4-second radio delay to make it look like they're halfway to the moon when they're still in Earth orbit. And 2 news directors agreed it proves they didn't go to the moon. And then we have, revealed for the first time in the book Moon Man, the deathbed confession of the chief of security at Cannon Air Force Base, who eyewitnessed the filming of the fake moon landing June 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of 1968. So if I am in court and I say I saw Sam shoot that person, I think they take it very seriously. And so an eyewitness testimony is doubly powerful when it's a deathbed confession. And not only this, he also confessed that he murdered a person. This guy said, as he's dying, trying to get right with God, fearing hell, said, "Dear Lord, and my son," who he's talking to as he's dying, "I killed another person. I killed a fellow worker at Cannon Air Force Base because he eyewitnessed the faking of the moon landing fraud, and he was going to tell a reporter. And I killed him to keep it a secret." You don't make that stuff up as you're dying, do you?
And telling your son, like your son would, like if it were my dad telling me that, I'd be more willing to not publish that information because it puts my father in a poor light. It seems like it was that important that this son divulges that information because it's that important.
Well, yeah, I didn't put the murder in the book because his son was still alive and didn't want to deal with it. He was dying himself when I was writing the book. So now that he has died, I'm free to tell that information. There's a lot of stuff in the book that I did not put in the film A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon because certain people asked me to wait until after their death, including the murder of the crew of Apollo 1, who was going to be the first crew on the moon. And this isn't my opinion. I mean, if Bobby Kennedy Jr., okay, who has more access to the JFK files than Oliver Stone, says that his uncle was killed by the CIA, you better believe it. And if the widow of the man who was going to be the first man to walk on the moon tells you that on January 26, 1967, her husband comes home, who was a whistleblower, who complained publicly on TV that NASA was 10 years away from going to the moon. He said, "Hon, for some strange reason, the CIA is all over the launch pad today, monkeying with the equipment. I wonder why. Never seen them here today for the first time. Why are they here?" Next day, the guy's dead from faulty equipment. His widow told me he was murdered by the CIA. His son, 747 pilot, said he was murdered by the CIA. So we have the government killing their own people in a country that's founded on the principle that when any government becomes destructive of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, they need to be altered or abolished. Well, they're murdering their own people. Not my opinion. Opinion of the dead man's widow. In fact, Robert McNamara, defense secretary during the Vietnam War, who said the public isn't behind this. What are we going to do? We need a Pearl Harbor event. He says he and the CIA just made up the Gulf of Tonkin incident of an alleged attack on an American ship. It never happened, he said, as he was dying. Well, that led to the death of 3 million people, including 58,220 Americans. So I think if they're willing to kill their own president, willing to kill their own astronauts, willing to kill 58,200 of their own soldiers, I think they're willing to fake an image on TV. But what this means is this is our government. They are murderers and embezzlers, right? They are destroying life, killing their own people. They're destroying liberty. I have to ask permission to have more than 4 people at my son's birthday party in California. And if I have 5 people there instead of 4, they will turn off my electricity and drag me off to jail. That is slavery, not freedom. I have to ask permission to open my business, ask permission to go shopping. That's slavery. How is that freedom? It's the exact opposite of freedom. So they've taken away life, they've taken away liberty, and if the pursuit of happiness is going to church or opening my business, they've taken that away. I don't care if 9 out of 10 people are dropping dead. It is my right to go shopping under those circumstances or to open my business under those circumstances. After all, 10% of the people are still alive. They need to buy tuna fish and toilet paper. Can't I sell it to them? I mean, this is ridiculous. And as a doctor, I'm sure you know something that many people don't know. We're told we're the most free nation on earth when we're the most enslaved, and we're told we have the best health care in the world when it's the worst. Because if you remove heart disease and cancer from the number 1 and number 2 cause of death, number 3 is medical malpractice. It's statistical fact. And then you have 70% of Americans taking prescription medicine. That means that 70% of Americans are sick all the time. If there's any nation on earth that has 70% of their people sick all the time, that country has the worst health care in the world.
Absolutely.
And we're told it's the best. I mean,
I,
it just boggles the mind.
I actually had a doctor chastise me because I had a patient. I saw the patient, and this guy was reviewing my chart, and I saw the patient, and he said, "Oh, well, you took them off their blood pressure medication and their statins. How dare you?" And it's like, isn't that our goal as primary care, as family medicine physicians, to get people healthy so they don't need medications? Seemingly not. Seemingly it's to put them on more medications.
Did you say that to that individual?
Didn't quite have the opportunity to. I can't divulge the particulars of that situation.
No, but I mean, did you give them that rebuttal?
In the best way that I could at the time. Yes, sir. And the patient was happy. Like that patient had normal.
What was your response to your rebuttal?
Unfortunately, there was no back and forth. Just the situation, the way it played out. But the patient, their blood pressure was normal that day and they hadn't taken it for weeks when I took them off of it. They were already off of it, and if you put someone on a blood pressure medication when they have normal blood pressure, they'll pass out and hurt themselves, bounce their head off the ground.
Yeah, I don't know. It seems kind of weird. And this is harder for people to see, the moon landing fraud, because they've fallen in love with it. It is that candy, it's that Santa Claus for adults. And the longer it goes on that they claim they could play golf and drive cars on the moon in the 60s, but today the best we can do is only orbit the moon with mannequins. Something's wrong with this picture. And it just epitomizes just the total corruption and arrogance of the federal government. And I don't know what to say. I mean, the Bible, when Jesus warns, I think it's in Matthew 25, that the tribulation in the last days will be greater than at any other time in world history. I believe because we'll have multiple tribulations going on simultaneously. We'll have pandemics, food shortages, war, earthquakes, and meteor showers all going on at the same time, in my opinion. And then he says, unless God intervenes, no one will be saved. So I interpret that to mean that the evil people who run the world, they're going to succeed. And they're going to gain the world and lose their soul. Technically, honest people in government, in society, could change their government. But I don't think it's going to happen. No offense, Sam. I could do 300 push-ups a day. That's not going to happen right now. And you go to any restaurant, you see this, Sam, go to any restaurant, get up, walk around, and 90% of the people at the tables have their faces in their cell phone instead of talking to the person next to them that they went to the restaurant to have fellowship with. How can we, when we watch 2.5 weeks of television per month, 2.5 work weeks worth of time, change the world? I mean, we're literally hypnotized, we're hypnotizing ourselves. Everyone lives in a virtual reality. And then the sad thing is, I have a nephew. I go over to his house. I'm like his favorite, Uncle Bart, Uncle Bart, Uncle Bart. And then as soon as I get a hug, he sits beside me on the couch watching videos on a cell phone on YouTube.
So I'm sorry.
And I'm like, you don't want to talk to people you're with, your favorite uncle. I mean, what's happened to people? And it's making people crazy, is what it's doing. And when you're like that, you cannot perceive the truth. And how ironic, the film, which you can see for free at Sibrel.com, A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon, financed $1 million by someone who builds rockets for NASA, who knows the moon missions are fake. It opens up with the Tower of Babel. To boast, it says Genesis 6, to be the best, the nation, the tallest building in the world, never finished. And the Titanic, in 1912, the largest machine ever built by the hand of man, they put in publicity posters, the ship that God himself could not sink. I think God rebuked that. Also never finished. And then Tricky Dick Nixon, when he knew they were not on the moon, said anyway, putting a man on the moon is the greatest event since God made the universe. How about that? You see, how ironic in our fallen world that world leaders, knowing they're not on the moon, have the arrogance to say that, and that mankind's greatest accomplishment is a complete lie in a world run by, Satan. I remember once, Sam, I went to a midweek at a church where, if you go to midweek, it's a little more interactive. It's not like on the Sabbath, whatever day that is for you, where you basically listen. It's more interchange. And so the preacher on a Wednesday said, who's Lord of the earth? And everyone's like, Jesus. And he says, wrong. Read your Bible.
Satan.
Luke chapter 4, right? He's
Yeah.
being tempted. Satan takes him to a tall, pinnacle of a mountain and says, bow down and worship Satan, and he'll give Jesus all the kingdoms of the world because they belong to Satan and he can give them to his people. That's why the world leaders are corrupt. They kill and steal and destroy and lie. A guy's running for president, says, I will not make medicine mandatory, I promise. 6 weeks later, he makes it mandatory. Why isn't it a law that if a politician makes a pledge and doesn't fulfill it, they are immediately thrown in jail for lying and kicked out of office? That would be a good law. It would be a fair law, right? It just boggles the mind. 90% of Americans wanted to know whether their ketchup or oatmeal contained genetically modified ingredients, GMO labeling. 90% of Americans wanted it. The president vetoed it. Now, I thought a democracy was 51% having their way. 90% cannot have their way. Congress and the Senate didn't vote to fake the moon landing and to kill President Kennedy. They did it anyway. So voting is meaningless. Just ask Ron Paul or Bernie Sanders if an outsider can ascend to the top. And they will not let that happen. I don't see how it's legal for Bernie Sanders to receive twice as many votes as Clinton, and yet she gets more delegates anyway. How can that possibly be legal? And when someone leaks out that information, it's being rigged. The FBI doesn't go after the rigging of an election. They go after the person who leaked the rigging of the election. That's who the FBI targeted. This is our country. William Benny works for the NSA for 30 years, goes on national television, says, oh, by the way, we spy on the private cell phone conversations of Supreme Court justices in order to get financial and sexual impropriety on them so that we can blackmail them to vote the way we tell them. It's an established fact, not a single investigation by Congress or the Justice Department into Supreme Court justices being blackmailed by the NSA, which no one contradicted as not being true. This is our country. What is going on? So faking an image on a television is nothing compared to blackmailing Supreme Court justices, killing astronauts, killing presidents, killing veterans without cause, and it goes on and on and on and on.
Wow. That's just an amazing summary because I'll give you my quick example. I'm one of three others, so there's a total 4 of us, defense military epidemiologic database whistleblowers. And so what we said is, hey, there is a huge safety signal here. We're seeing 1,000% increase in this diagnosis. We're seeing 400% increase in cancers and deep vein thrombosis and all these issues. And these are only in active duty service members. And we came out with that information. And Senator Ron Johnson wrote a letter to the Secretary of Defense. He said, preserve this information, keep it safe, and I need to look into it. And then about a week later, the database was taken down. The entire thing was changed and then put back up, which means it took a conspiracy, more than one person, to take the database down and change all the information, which is the forward-facing eyes of the medical system for the military. So aiding and abetting the enemy. So it's conspiracy to commit treason. And yet nothing's happened.
Yeah, I know. It's like people, because we're in the military and oath of office, I presume, still of police officers to protect America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, right? Do you really think China wants to be at war with their best customer, the United States of America, where if we were destroyed, their economy would collapse for decades? Right? Do you really think Russia, who has, 1/10 of the nuclear weapons we do, want to start a nuclear war and be, bombed into oblivion? No, of course not. They may be a competitor, but they're not really a threat. So to constantly blame Russia, constantly blame China is only misdirection because the perpetrators are in the federal government. Who killed Kennedy? The federal government. The CIA. Who faked the moon landing? The federal government. Who did 9/11? 3,000 architects and engineers say it's impossible mechanically for a pinhole airplane to go in and out of a steel grid and cause it to collapse. All you got to do is look at a picture of the Oklahoma City bombing. Half the building's blown away and the thing stood because it's a grid. A pinhole in and out of an airplane cannot cause its collapse if half the building blown away won't cause its collapse. 3,000 architects and engineers risked their reputations, their livelihood, saying this is a fact. 20 years later, nothing done about it. I mean, it just boggles the mind. It's done right out in the open.
What's interesting is I had this realization today about you're in the book 1984. There are about 3 or 4 different countries, and they're always at war, changing their alliances one the other, and changing alliance so they can control the people. And what you just said about Russia and China, it makes you begin to wonder, is there something of that situation going on now?
Well, the CIA is madly in love with the Chinese government. They wish they could get away with what they get away with in China. And so if there is a war in the future with China, it'll be completely staged. I'm not saying people won't be killed and things won't be bombed and military hardware won't be destroyed, but it will be orchestrated like a script between the CIA and the Chinese government to get their whatever goal is. It's my opinion that this little thing we've been going through for the last 3 years, and of course my opinion is simply the opinion of the experts I've interviewed or watched interviews with. If a former vice president of the pharmaceutical company who's selling the medicine says there is no illness circulating around, they're making it up, I believe him. And if he says this medicine is dangerous and likely going to kill off millions of people, I believe him. I take it to the next step. Well, why are they doing that? I believe there's a cosmic event heading toward Earth. something from outer space. The big clue is Janet Napolitano's farewell address, like Eisenhower's farewell address, military-industrial complex morning. She said on her last day in office, a natural disaster is coming that has never happened before in the history of America. Her successor is going to need a big bottle of Tylenol to deal with it. Well, there's three clues here. What's coming is a natural disaster. It's a natural disaster that has never happened in America. And a third hidden clue, a natural disaster that somehow you could know about years in advance. Well, we've had volcanoes and earthquakes and hurricanes, and you can't predict those years in advance. We've never had a meteor or a comet, you see? And you can predict it in advance, even though it's a natural disaster. That's the only one that fits all of this. I believe that event is coming. I believe this little thing of the last 3 years is to lower the number of people on the earth in preparation for that event, like a firefighter setting a fire to stop a fire. In their minds, if a solar system event happens, half the people on the earth could die in 1 year. That's too many people too quickly in their minds. So they are lowering the number of people gradually in preparation for that event. Regarding the moon landing, I think they'll just keep postponing, returning to the moon, because 10 presidents have said 10 times they're going to return to the moon in 5 years and never done it. They'll just keep postponing it until there's a global collapse, global pandemic, meteor shower, whatever, and then no one will care who shot JFK or if the moon landings are real or not. This is what's coming down the pike. And secular people think so, and biblical people think so. And when secular analysis lines up with the book of Revelation exactly, I say these events are very likely to happen, and likely in the near future.
Yeah, that's stunning. I mean, I feel we are headed for a Babel moment, because our language needs to be confused. You know, we're toying with making and I'm using this lowercase g, making a God who will seem like a God to us with AI. You know, certainly not the God of the universe, but something that thinks in levels that we can't think, at speeds that we can't even begin to comprehend, that could, you know, with its own existence and feel that it needs to destroy us. You know, there's been many movies that have portrayed this idea, and here we are just playing with it, and it's called GPT-3. And then like 6 months later, they come out with GPT-4, which is 90% better. We have no idea what we're toying with and what we're doing. And it would actually probably be a godsend for him to come and confuse our language. For as disastrous as I understand that is, and how dangerous and how many people would die in a situation where our languages of ones and zeros gets confused, that would be better than allowing the AI to continue.
Well, they have some technology they don't share. Like there's a lot of space-based weapons that can just zap a building and don't need to drop a bomb, don't need to send a missile. Those are kind of aces in the hole the intelligence agencies use, and they don't talk about it because then there won't be need for all these ships and aircraft that they keep making money off of. And so another technology that's been around for a while, probably a little bit more than 20 years, is AI's ability to write software. And for basically write self-fixing software. You know how you have upgrades, there's a bug, re-download the software. This software fixes itself. It finds its own problems, and it makes the software super duper efficient. And it just keeps improving. All that to say, when you have a being whose basically number one goal is to be efficient, it has, of course, no compassion. And the executive producer of A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon, the one who was the multimillionaire who gave us the money, he had a company with, several employees, a lot. And he was concerned. And he constantly thought about his company success, keeping it successful because scores and scores of families depended on him to pay their mortgage. And this guy, at the time he had that compassion, was an atheist, you see? So he still had compassion in him, even as an atheist. And AI does not. And so it's like a reptile. There's an
Yes.
account, true story, about this young man, I guess as a maybe adolescent, 10, 12-year-old, gets a boa constrictor as a birthday gift. It's like a foot and a half long. And then it becomes 2 feet long and 3 feet long and 4 feet long, and then 6 feet long and 8 feet long. And so by the time he's 24 and about to get married, it's like 8 feet long. And I'm sure his wife wasn't thrilled about having that in the house, but he's had it for all these years, and I guess I got to take the good with the bad. And then the couple eventually has a toddler son, and there's a picture of them sitting on the couch with the big snake across their lap and the baby's hand, petting the head of the snake, which is about the size of a dinner plate. And lo and behold, a year or so after that picture was taken, they come home and they find the snake with the toddler's leg down its throat. You see, you would think the snake would, know that this is their child, their precious, precious child, but it doesn't care.
It's a
And
snake. Doesn't care.
so, yeah, the AI is like that. It's just doing its job of being super efficient. And if it can use 1% less electricity by killing 1 million people, it might choose to do that. You see? So you got to be really careful. The thing is, they really don't have, what's the right word? An existence. They're not a true being, consciousness. They don't truly have consciousness. It's not possible. However, they can be super efficient and mimic conversation and things like that. I actually came up with a test that's infallible, I believe, that would test whether or not an AI has true consciousness or not. But in any
Can you
case,
share it?
maybe, no, I'm going to keep that a secret, hopefully sell it to Elon
Okay.
Musk for $1 million. But, and he'll agree when he hears it that this is absolutely foolproof and genuine a way of testing whether AI, anyone who hears it will agree. Oh, yeah. So, but anyway, I don't think it's ever possible, but if they're ever put in charge of human decisions, yeah, it could be disastrous. So, one of the things that could be motivation for these people who want to lower the population is the fact that they don't need all these people anymore. I have a podcast you can subscribe to if you go to Sibrel.com. It's like $10 a month. It's called Bart Sibrel's Box Escape. Like if you want to think outside of the box, even of the alternative media, which can be led astray. And I think episode 1, and when you subscribe, you get all the past episodes, is I think I called it Hitler Jr., because the World Economic Forum, whose logo right there out in the open is 3 sixes, 666, hidden in plain sight right in their logo, the people who run the world, their chief advisor says, quote, "We've got 3 to 4 billion useless people on the earth. What are we going to do to get rid of them?" Or words to that effect. And,
Is this Yuval
it's
Haraldi?
like, yeah, that's him. And so I was like, wow. I mean, just how can I've seen people without a soul, you could say, or without compassion or whatever you want to call it. I've seen them. Most of them were CIA agents trying to kill me, and it's amazing when you meet another human being and you look them in the eye, and they would kill you and go home and have a fried chicken dinner and not think about it. You know what I mean? There are people like that. It's like a great white shark looking into their eye. There's nobody at home. There's no soul. And I've met people like that. And I could even say I've been like that. When I argue with people, I don't know how it is. I've never officially been in the military, but, to be at war and to kill people, you have to throw a switch in your mind and to do it. And I've thrown that switch in my mind when I'm mad at people to just kind of be callous and heartless or whatever. And the Bible warns about this, that people's consciousness can be seared as with a hot iron to where they basically close the door on themselves to their own redemption, making it theoretically impossible for themselves to ever be saved of their own choosing, to become a snake, to become compassionless. It just boggles the mind that someone would articulate and brag on media and be the consultant to the people who run the world who want to lower the population, saying we have useless people. The guy's Jewish, and that's what, they used to say about the Jews, useless eaters. And how can he parrot back the same thing as a Jew? I just have no idea how he could possibly do that. But these are dangerous times. The people who run the world want to get rid of 95% of us. They say it as their goal over and over again. I don't think they're twiddling their thumbs, hoping for that it's just going to happen. I think they have a plan, and I think that plan is well underway.
Yeah, I mean, it's the unseen realm. Our fight is not against flesh and blood, but against rulers and principalities of darkness that they talk about in Ephesians. And it's not even, the curtain has been pulled back. It is a full force battle, war going on in front of our face at this very moment. And it's almost impossible to not see it. And, people are still responsible for what they do, even though our battle is not with them in particular. It's with this unseen realm. But this unseen realm has been around for millennia, and it knows what we do. It knows how to whisper in a man's ear and a woman's ear and do this for you, it'll be good for you, and it destroys lives in the meantime. It knows how to trick people in that.
Yeah, I've written a few articles. They're at Sibrel.com. You can scroll down about halfway. One is called, Are There Really Aliens? And it's a pretty intense article. I spent hundreds of hours researching it and writing it. And again, my opinion about this event for the last 3 years and what the medicine means, it's just the opinion that I have studied of other doctors and people who used to work manufacturing and selling the medicine. I figure they know, and if it's their opinion, it's not good for you, and their opinion, they're making an excuse to distribute it. I believe them. So the top two UFO researchers who spent about 4 decades looking at alien abduction and UFOs and all this, independent of one another, finally came to the following conclusion, which was identical. Number one, aliens are real. Not aliens, UFOs are real. Number two, they're not from outer space. They're from Earth. And number three, they're demonic. You see, when people are being abducted, they invoke the name of Jesus and the aliens run away. If they're really aliens from another planet, why would invoking the name of Sam, Bart, Buddha, or Jesus matter to them, right? And that they're real, people, I witnessed them coming out of the ocean, flying through the air, so they're real, but they're not from outer space. They're from another dimension. And that's what you're talking about in Ephesians 5. Our struggle is against the principalities in the hidden, unseen world, right? Jesus came from heaven, did he not? Right? And how did he enter this realm? Through the human body. You see that? Did he not say heaven was within you? It's like there's an hourglass turned on its side. On the left is earth, and on the right of the hourglass is heaven, and in the middle is the gate. Jesus is the gate for the sheep. The thief comes in another way. Jesus is God's only begotten Son. You see, Satan came in another way, right? He wasn't born, was he? And in order to get to heaven, we have to go through the gate. And I say heaven is physically within you in another dimension. You see that? Jesus came from heaven. It came from a woman's body. He came from heaven. It's in another dimension, literally inside of the woman's body. And so when we die, we don't ascend. It kind of goes down. You see, it comes out the other end. So there's something going on the other side. Scientists talk about this. Einstein talked about it. The quantum particles, one here, one there.
String theory.
antimatter, and there are demonic forces. Now, some people apparently intentionally worship Lucifer. They have 666 in their logo. Do all of the people who run the world do that? Does Bill Gates do that? I think in Bill Gates' case, probably not, but he doesn't believe in God. So what's left to come in and give him those little whispers in his ear like you talked about? The demons, hey, why don't we do this? Why don't you do this? Well, this idea, that idea, right? So this is what's going on. I think this is why Jesus said, love your enemy. And of course, to me, that's the Achilles heel of Christianity. People hold grudges. They think they have a right not to talk to anybody ever again, right? Because they wronged them or crossed the line or whatever. You see, that's not forgiveness. And he warns, I think in Matthew 6:15, if we do not forgive others, our sins will not be forgiven on Judgment Day. He said, if you only love people who love you, you're no different than a pagan non-believer. They love people who love them and hate people who hate them. Love your enemies, you see, because the demonic man was possessed. You see, he was on the surface an enemy, but he was really sick, right? He was ill and needed compassion. And that's why love covers over a multitude of sins. And he says, overcome evil with good, right? And so if we don't love our enemy, then we're not really Christians. And maybe if our enemies are, possessed of sorts. Everybody is a murderer if they've hated someone in their heart, according to Jesus, right? And so Bill Gates is a lost sheep like we all were before we got saved. And all these other, quote, evil people who allegedly run the world and are out to do people harm, they're lost, right? Imagine the great grand testimony if that guy from the Economic Forum or Bill Gates or George Soros or anybody we consider a boogeyman became converted and gave glory to God and repented of their sin. What a marvelous, marvelous thing. And so this is the state of things, and the moon landing, to me, the fraud is just the epitome of the rule of Lucifer, of the United States government being super corrupt, and the fall of man, the folly of man, that our greatest accomplishment is a complete lie and incomplete, just like the ship that got him couldn't sink, and just like the tower to reach the heavens was never finished. This is the way that it is. And I go into great detail about this with videos to back it up in the book Moon Man at Sibrel.com.
Yeah, oh man, this went a great way. I love this. We didn't get to talk about all the things that I wanted to, but I think this was a different way, a better way. Probably something you don't typically get to talk about on other interviews. So, thank you so much for going in depth in all of this. And I want to encourage people to go get your book. Listen to it. I listen to books. That's what I do. But the thing is, if you listen to a book on some sort of media, it's not yours. If someone wants to take it off your phone, it's gone. Just like U2, the band, put their album on my phone. I didn't want it there. Someone can steal that information the same way. So buy the hard copy, put it on your shelf, and no one can touch it. He goes in depth into all of those arguments that he discussed at the beginning, and it makes you wonder, like, if they really did this, why would they have to fake anything? Because they'd have actual pictures. If they faked one thing, why would they need to do that? Unless it was all a big fraud, which that's the claim you make, and I think it's the only logical explanation that one can get to.
Yeah, I had to face facts. If you have cancer, do you want to know? Or do you want to live in denial? I think it's better to know. No one was a bigger fan of the moon landings than me. And for me to come out and say, unfortunately, they were indeed falsified is a big deal. And so what can you do? We live in a fallen world with arrogant, murderous, embezzling government leaders. That's just the way that it is. Better to know that than to pretend that it's not that way.
Oh, I have a question that I was asked to ask a previous guest. His name was Flat Earth Dave Weiss, and this doctor friend of mine wanted me to, because he doesn't believe the moon is where we think it is, and I'm not putting that belief on you. That's a different man with a different idea, but he doesn't believe we've been to the moon either. And this doctor friend of mine wanted me to ask him, and I'm going to ask you the same question. Have we ever been to the moon in any other form or fashion, or not the way that the Apollo mission went?
Well, I think there are probes on the moon. I think the Chinese probes are genuine. And I think maybe NASA sent a probe to the moon. You can x-ray a toaster 1,000 times and it'll still make toast. But you can't do that to a human, and this is why there's mannequins orbiting the moon, because they have to go through a field of radiation that NASA's own Kelly Smith says is deadly, and that the technology necessary to pass through it and survive has yet to be invented. It's one of the clips in my book. And I believe the Earth is a sphere. I think that's misinformation to discredit people who know that the moon missions are fake. The fact is, we don't have to pass a geography exam to enter heaven. The Earth could be a triangle. That's not the issue. The issue is the corruption of the federal government.
Exactly. And all these answers, my kind of thought on it is it's interesting to think about all of these ideas, and we'll get all the true answers someday in the future. But to expose fraud and lies is what we're called to do, because otherwise we're allowing that to continue, and we're living that lie too.
Yep, what can you do? Except pray and save yourself from this corrupt generation.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. And where can people find you again?
Yeah, just go to my last name, S as in Sam, I, B as in boy, R-E-L, Sibrel.com.
Thank you so much. Just a reminder for everyone out there, duty uniform of the day, the full armor of God. Let's all make courage more contagious than fear. I recently got a new affiliate. It's Harvest Right Freeze Dryer. I've been using them since 2016. It's a great way to preserve food for long periods of time, up to 25 years if stored properly. Please take a look at it. Use the link below. Thank you.